Hey gang, what's up? Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. How's it all going? That's a little look at what we're going to be getting into. This is going to be about what goes on in the House of Commons after hours. We've got a poll up there about Broom Christia, like taking off to the Ukraine. Good riddance. I hope they get your butt back here and charge you with the crimes that you should be facing. Anyhow, in the meantime, best of luck in the Ukraine. Whatever. So we're first going to look at Pierre Poilievre looking for a budget, and then we're going to get into the things that happened in the House of Commons after question period. That's when the Conservatives are trying to hold the Liberals to accountability. That's the job of the opposition. Anyhow, let's get into this. It should be fun. We're going to skip all the French parts. We'll probably skip pieces of the Liberals, but we're going to listen to what every Conservative has to say. This is a bit of a research for me. I have not seen any of this yet. Anything that we're going to be watching here tonight, I haven't seen. This is doing research to make other videos. If I see something interesting or learn something, I'll share it with the world. Like, we are trying to expose these corrupt Liberals. So let's kick things off. Here we go.
Food and homes are.
Oh, here we go. In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups. The globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories.
Country where hard work is rewarded, food and homes are affordable, streets are safe, borders are solid, and we're all united under a proud flag. Our priorities for the session are very clear. We want stronger take-home pay with lower taxes and bigger paychecks. We want safer streets by locking up the criminals that Liberals turn loose. We want solid borders by reversing the Liberal immigration mess. And we want a self-reliant Canada by bringing home the hundreds of billions of dollars of investment Liberals have pushed out of our country. And Mr. Carney promised a lot of these things, beautiful promises, but it was a bait and switch. Today we learned that he will only introduce a budget after 2/3 of the fiscal year is already over, during which time he will have doubled the deficit, spent blindly, and driven up inflation on Canadians who can't afford food or homes. This is exactly the opposite of what he promised. It's amazing. And when I said that Mark Carney was just the same as Justin Trudeau, everyone said that was unfair. And you know what? They were right. It's unfair to Justin Trudeau. Mark Carney is more expensive than Justin Trudeau. His deficit is even bigger than Justin Trudeau. His spending on bureaucracy and consultants much higher than Justin Trudeau. He is doing Mark Carney with his rampant, unbudgeted deficit spending that drives up food and housing costs, is breaking his promise and doing another Liberal bait and switch. Conservatives are demanding the government reverse this reckless Liberal spending to bring down the deficit, inflation, and the cost of living before his November budget comes forward. Thank you very much.
Mr. Poilievre said yesterday that you're going to support the Liberals when there's things to support, oppose them when necessary. When it comes to the budget, where are you going to land on that? Are you going to support it?
Which budget?
The one November 4th that was announced.
Do you have a copy you can give me?
I don't.
Okay,
But
when you get one, then I'll answer your question.
are there anything in there that would make it so that you wouldn't support it? I mean, tell me what your views are.
I'm saying that Mark Carney needs to keep his promise and reverse the massive spending increases that he has brought in that have caused the deficit to double without even introducing the budget.
Mr. Poilievre, what will Mr. Freeland's legacy be in your view?
That's a good question. I think it was that she resigned rather than introduce a $62 billion deficit. I think she said the Liberals were trying to force her to introduce a deficit of $62 billion. And she said, this is irresponsible, it is out of control, and it will cause massive inflation. And of course, that deficit went ahead anyway, and now it's even bigger. She's probably trying to get out of town and as far away as possible before this disastrous November budget comes in. I don't blame her.
Est-ce que, M. Poilievre, si le déficit approche 90 milliards, comme certaines projections estiment. Est-ce que selon vous, le Canada est à risque de perdre sa cote AAA?
Oui, absolument. Parce que si on additionne la dette publique avec la dette privée, on est l'un des pays les plus endettés au monde par rapport au PIB. Donc, M. Carney, avec ses dépenses hors de contrôle, menace la sécurité économique de notre pays, en plus de causer une souffrance massive pour les gens qui ont de la misère à payer leurs factures.
Premier Danielle Smith said that she thinks Ottawa is finally getting it when she saw the first 5 projects that were announced in the major list of ideas that would be approved. The first one was approved today. What do you make of Premier Smith's comments that she thinks Ottawa is doing the right thing on this list?
Well, we have is that after Liberals have blocked projects and driven $800 billion of investment out of our country over the last 10 years, Mark Carney has been even worse than Justin Trudeau. He's driven away another $62 billion of investment, and he is keeping in place all of the anti-development laws that Liberals passed. It's incredible that the best he could come up with was to list 5 projects that were already approved, some of which were already under construction. And I was waiting for him to announce today that he was going to approve the construction of the St. Lawrence Seaway.
On s'attend, M. Poilievre, à ce que le déficit soit important lors du budget. Est-ce que le conseil de gouvernement va se trouver sur vous, soit le NPD, soit le Bloc, pour l'appuyer sur ce budget-là, ou s'il y a un déficit qui frôle les 100 milliards, personne pourra appuyer le gouvernement?
Mais on voit déjà le taux de l'inflation qui est en hausse, le taux de base de l'inflation est en hausse. Support for the Niska project, if you want to check my Twitter account, I announced my support for this project 3 years ago. So, maybe if you ever want to see into the future of what Mr. Carney will do, check on the things that I was talking about 3 years earlier.
But you asked
What
what
does it say to you about the country's finances that this budget hasn't been developed until November?
Can I want to add one more thing? I think I encourage him to approve all the LNG projects. We should have 15 of these things up and running. The Americans have 8. The Qataris have doubled their LNG production. We have the best advantage in the world. It takes 11 days to ship from Canada to Asia. It takes 20 days to ship from the U.S. Gulf Coast to Asia. We use 25% electricity to liquefy gas because our cold weather does a lot of the work on its own. We have more abundance of electricity than do the Americans. So why is it that they're eating our lunch? Well, because the Liberals are standing in the way. The only thing they need to do, that Mark Carney needs to do one thing, a very simple thing: get out of the way. And then these projects will go ahead with private investment. They are massively profitable, and they can contribute to our country. Sorry, I didn't mean to divert it, I didn't feel I had given an adequate answer there. So your question is, what does it say about the state of our finances? Well, it suggests that the Liberal government has no idea what it's doing. When it introduces a budget, 2/3 after the fiscal year is already done. Like 8 months of the 12-month fiscal year will be behind us. And in that time, Mr. Carney will have doubled the deficit, ballooned the bureaucracy, and increased the inflation rate, all the opposite of what he promised. Another Liberal bait and switch. Thank you very much.
Can I ask you about Mr. Freeland's appointment today? Do you think it's a real job?
Cambridge.
Yeah, so just to give a quick explanation, this is what goes on in the House of Commons after question period. Like, all of the politicians don't just go to question period. They even the other side are pretty busy, but it'll be interesting here to see, like, for example, I don't know this MP. She was just recently elected. I know her name's Cody, last name's Cody, I think. But again, I haven't seen this. This is where we're going to learn some things about Canadian federal politics behind the scenes. This stuff isn't covered by hardly anyone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I move to the matter at hand, I just want to say what a privilege it is to be back here in Ottawa to fight for the people of Cambridge and North Dumfries. It's been nearly 3 months since members of Parliament have been in this place to debate issues of importance and hold the government accountable for their actions. It's almost like the government didn't want anybody to hold them accountable, or maybe they wanted a long, lazy summer vacation. Whatever it was, it certainly was no vacation for me and my team. Every day we were out in the community, attending events, helping constituents with casework, and listening to all the things that are on our neighbors' minds. And what did they have to say? They told me overwhelmingly that a decade of Liberal government has made life harder. Finding a good paying job, or any kind of job, is harder. Affording a home or even an apartment is harder. Affording the necessity of life, just the basics like groceries, is harder. I'm always going to stand up for these fundamental issues and be a champion for common sense and the Canadian dream that hard work can pay off. Life is also harder for the most vulnerable in our community. The exploding number of homeless encampments and people experiencing homelessness is an incredibly visibly and heart-wrenching concern for all of us. It's hard to take a walk through downtown Cambridge without seeing one of our neighbours in distress. People who don't have a warm place to sleep, a warm meal to eat, or a chance at getting back on their feet. What used to be a peaceful area has now been transformed into ground zero of a tent city disaster unfolding right before our eyes. The Liberal manufactured housing crisis, which has caused home prices to double in less than a decade, is a big part of why there are so many people sleeping on our streets. But another huge reason is the wave of addiction and the opioid epidemic that has flooded our communities, big and small. The Liberal government fanned the flames of that program, offering free drugs and a quick high instead of hope and recovery for the people who needed it most. And they left our borders vulnerable and open to international gangs and smugglers to use our country as a dumping ground for drugs like fentanyl. Those drugs end up on the streets in cities like mine, and even just a tiny amount can literally kill you. Now they put forward a new bill, Bill C-2, that's supposed to address the problem of fentanyl on our streets and narcotics being smuggled across our border. In all seriousness, that's like the person who set your house on fire showing up with a bucket to put out the flames. It just doesn't make sense. The same people who broke it cannot and should not be trusted to fix it. Mr. Speaker, fentanyl isn't just another drug. It is a lethal poison that is tearing apart families in Cambridge, North Dumfries, and every community across Canada. A few grains can end a life. Paramedics in my riding respond to overdose calls daily, and our hospitals are overwhelmed with patients fighting for their lives. Parents tell me they are terrified their child will be the next obituary. That's the human cost, not statistics, but loved ones lost. Drug smugglers don't operate alone. They are tied to organized crime, violent gangs, and international cartels that see Canada as an easy target. When border controls are weak, those criminals walk right through the cracks. Bill C-2 talks about tightening enforcement, but without tougher bail conditions and mandatory jail time, the same gang members will be back on our streets within days. Canadians deserve laws that protect victims, not revolving doors for offenders. The government can pat itself on the back for introducing Bill C-2, but here's the truth. There are many parts of this legislation that are far too short. There are no new tools for prosecutors to keep traffickers behind bars. There are no real investments in treatment and recovery that offer people hope instead of despair. And there are no guarantees that the flow of precursor chemicals, the ingredients for fentanyl, will actually be stopped at the border. So for all the government's talk, there's no guarantee that this bill will actually end the opioid epidemic. Far from it. Conservatives believe in strong borders, serious sentences for smugglers, and a pathway to recovery for those trapped in addiction. That's what real leadership looks like. Let me be clear. I'm ready to work with anybody from any party who wants to help fix our borders, stop the drugs, and get people in my community the help that they need. But we simply can't afford more of the same things from the same Liberal government. More talk and more empty platitudes with devastating consequences for Canadians. And that's what this bill is all about. It doesn't implement bail reform for violent gang members and smugglers who make drugs, transport drugs, sell drugs, and destroy the lives of people who live in my riding and hundreds of thousands of people across this country. So that means the people who are driving the crisis get to keep walking through the Liberal revolving door of no consequences, free to keep flooding our streets with narcotics. And if you do happen to be put behind bars, this bill doesn't implement stricter sentencing provisions. We still have no mandatory prison time for fentanyl traffickers, no mandatory prison time for gangsters who commit violent crimes with guns. We need to stop the smugglers, put the bad guys in jail, and end the Liberal regime of endless free drugs for everyone. Instead of cracking down on the drug traffickers and gangs that fuel this crisis, the Liberals are trying to hide the problem by shuffling people into senior housing without safeguards. Individuals dealing with drugs and creating disorder are being placed in the same apartment buildings as vulnerable seniors. The result is theft, fear, and seniors who feel like prisoners in their own homes. I hear this every week from seniors in my community. They worked hard all their lives and they should feel safe in their homes, but many of them no longer do. Bill C-2 does nothing to change that. It goes after paperwork, not the predators. It leaves the real criminals free while vulnerable Canadians live in fear. When the government isn't using this bill to keep letting criminals roam free on our streets, they're taking massive new steps to give themselves more power to control the everyday lives of Canadians. For instance, they want to impose a massive new restriction on the use of cash in private transactions, limiting cash payments of $10,000 or more. Our multinational banker and economist prime minister should realize this. Seniors, farmers, and small businesses often rely on cash for larger purchases or sales. Restricting those transactions won't stop organized crime. It just makes life harder for people who follow the rules. Now let's talk about what this bill does do. Bill C-2 will give the government the power to open mail without oversight, force internet companies to hand over their data, and give themselves more opportunities to perform warrantless searches. Canadians need to know that Bill C-2 goes well beyond border measures. It also introduces new surveillance powers that deserve a full and separate debate. If the government believes these powers are necessary, they should be studied carefully in their own bill with the proper scrutiny of Parliament. I don't know about you, Mr. Speaker, but to me, this looks like the Liberal government is focusing on giving themselves more powers at the cost of law-abiding Canadian civil liberties, instead of actually going after the dangerous criminals that threaten the safety of not just the people of Cambridge, but of all Canadians. These measures are wrong and must be fixed, because we know that when Ottawa gets more powers, it never, ever gives them up. We wouldn't have even needed to introduce a bill like this in the first place if the Liberal government hadn't broken what they inherited from Stephen Harper: a strong border, a functioning criminal justice system, and a safe and secure immigration process that was the envy of the world. Instead, after 10 years of an incompetent and out-of-touch government, drugs and guns, criminals and contraband flow across our borders with impunity. Those criminals often get more rights than their victims, while getting a slap on the wrist and paying no price whatsoever. And that's not to mention an immigration system that nobody, not even immigrants themselves, trust to work in the best interest of this country. Mr. Speaker, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that we can fix all of these problems. I still believe that Canada is the best country in the world and a place we're so blessed to call home. And I remain honored to be Cambridge's voice in this place through the good times and the bad times. But the bad news is that we can't trust this Liberal government, an overbearing, incompetent, careless government, to clean up the mess they themselves created. Bill C-2 is called the Strong Borders Act, but there is nothing strong about weak sentencing, revolving door justice, and half measures that punish honest Canadians more than criminals. If this government were serious about strong borders, they'd listen to our Conservative proposals: secure the border, end catch and release for traffickers, and give people struggling with addiction a real chance at recovery. We're calling for better. Police are calling for better. Victims and their families are calling for better. Is this government going to listen, Mr. Speaker? Only time will tell.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Madawaska.
The Honourable.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Conservative colleague is talking about the importance of border security.
Yeah, so I'm not doing any French at all. I don't like this guy anyways. And I don't care what he has to say. Oh.
Unlike the member opposite, I'm here to debate the safety of all Canadians, not engage in political games. My constituents are suffering more than I've ever seen in my life and need the government to focus on criminals causing this, not cracking down on the civil liberties of all Canadians. Bail reform is the biggest priority for keeping Canadians safe. So why is the Liberal government avoiding the topic instead of focusing on collecting Canadians' mail without a warrant?
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to get my colleague's opinion. Something earlier the member for Winnipeg North said was that we should just take the Liberals' word for it that they believe in protecting the charter rights of Canadians for privacy because back in the 1980s they were the party that brought the charter in. Well, if we have to take the Liberals for granted on everything they campaigned on in the 1980s, they were against free trade then. So is that also why we're not getting a deal with Trump on free trade today? Because they're secretly still back in the 1980s and everything they were committed to back then. So perhaps my colleague from Cambridge can, respond to the question about whether or not we can take the Liberals' campaign platform at their word, or whether we should be looking back in time to see where they really stand on these issues.
Member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for his good question. And he's got a good point. A lot of people no longer trust this government after a decade of decay. And it's truly depressing to see our seniors not even feeling safe in their own homes because the Liberal government's soft on crime agenda. By letting drugs run so rampant in all communities, we are seeing drug addicts housed in senior homes rather than getting them rehab or help. We see them getting drugs from either the government or their dealers while out on bail. Seeing drug dealers and violent gang members run free while our most vulnerable, our seniors, cower in their own homes is truly depression. Just a few weeks ago, an elderly lady in Guelph was beaten and died of her injuries in broad daylight. This is not the Canada I grew up in. You wonder about trust? Look at the last 10 years.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State Combating Crime.
I've listened to the Honourable Member and I appreciate her concern. My question, though, is as follows. We know that there's been a loophole in the code for decades, and the bad guys have been exploiting this within Canada Post. They've been shipping fentanyl and other illicit material through Canada Post. So the same rules that our national security apparatus and police force have in terms of pulling packages off of UPS and FedEx, they have not been able to do with Canada Post. We have to close that loophole. So my question to the Honourable Member is, what would you like us to do?
Order questions through the chair. The Honourable Member for Cambridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that's the purpose of a warrant, and I think that is what Canadians are looking for, is to keep their privacy in hand as well as looking after the criminals. But if this government is serious about helping Canadians, they need to separate the omnibus bill so we can come together to pass the few measures in here that will actually help and leave their power grab portions to be debated separately. They would also add the bail reform Canadians have been begging for to keep drug traffickers off our street.
Questions and comments. Your time for a brief question. The Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member here from Cambridge, a strong female member of Parliament, and excited to be serving with her. I'd like to talk a little bit about intimate partner violence. She mentioned the effect that limiting cash under $10,000 would have on seniors. I wonder if she could comment on what that could mean for women trying to escape abuse.
The Honourable Member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your question. I also enjoy working alongside our colleague, and I appreciate her questions and concerns. As we know, just recently, there was a death out in BC that was horrendous, and a woman dies every 6 days from murder. It's a huge issue and concern, and should be for all parties. And to escape, there could be major costs involved in transactions, and so I think that we have to keep in mind all these issues and debate this separately.
Resuming debate. Reprise du débat. L'Honourable Secretary Parlementaire du...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to have the
today to speak a geographic expansion.
For us, it is a language we work in, we live in, and we feel in our hearts. That's a strong...
Over 110 million ounces of gold, 215 million ounces of silver, 6 million tons of zinc, 4 million tons of copper, 330,000 tons of lead, 50,000 tons of nickel, and 200,000 tons of talc, with an economic value of $580 billion in today's money, and will continue to produce. Exploration continues to this day. Current projects have identified over 5 billion tons of nickel, of precious metals, of critical metal, or reserves worth over $1 trillion, with a further 12 billion tons of reserve under review, positioning our region as a cornerstone for Canada's future manufacturing needs. These developments, extracted using cutting-edge carbon capture techniques, will contribute to reducing atmospheric carbon dioxide well into the next century. Our forests, too, have long sustainably been managed properly, with an average annual harvest of 4.5 million cubic meters from 12 operating sawmills. Modern practices and improved tree species could potentially double this harvest, aligning with Canada's climate goal and growing demand for recyclable products. For example, replacing plastic bags with paper could revive pulp production and put another line of pulp at the cap paper in Kapuskasing. Agriculture is also thriving to the tune of $140 million per year with grain, hay, livestock, cash crop, well established in the Great Clay Belt of the northeastern Ontario, with access to transportation infrastructure which provides enormous opportunities for agribusiness. Indeed, university scholars have said that the Great Clay Belt will become Canada's next agricultural breadbasket. Mr. Speaker, I hope I have convened the scale of the economic treasure box our region represents. However, realizing its full potential requires collaboration with our 11 First Nations, by working together on infrastructure, roads, energy, railroads. We can unlock jobs, attract skilled workers, and revitalize the 46 communities of the riding. Mr. Speaker, let's make Canada's North a beacon of opportunity for all by not forgetting that 95% of our greatest resource is us, the Canadians. Our corner of Canada, one of the most linguistically and culturally distinct region in the country, while the Francophone identity runs deep, nearly half of the population has knowledge of both official language. This dual linguistic character is an asset for the future and should be supported by federal policy. Mr. Speaker, I am excited that these social and economic development will benefit not only our riding, but every Canadian. I am committed to rising to this challenge for the benefit of my constituents and all of Canada.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we need to build Canada back because currently things are not going well. Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for Rimouski-Lamatane, Matapédia. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Priority for them as government. The Honourable Member. Thank you. First, I was talking about my riding. In my colleague's incredible speech for region.
Maybe team to share some of the possible.
You being in this chair, I want to congratulate you and also the constituents of yours from Perth, Wellington for electing you, and I'm very happy to have you in this chair.
All right, gang. I'm going to figure this out. We're going to find something more interesting to watch than what we have happening here. It'll just be a moment. Hang with me. I know this is painful.
Under the Act includes any information, any paper information weighing less than 500 grams, that's half a kilogram, delivered to a specific addressee that includes a message or information in any form, and it doesn't even have to be enclosed in an envelope. This bill could make a distinction between what we think of as a letter and larger items that meet the technical definition of a letter in the Act but aren't actually a letter. And whether that reflects sloppy drafting or something else, the net effect of the deletion of these 4 little words is far more than a technical amendment to postal operations. It strikes at the heart of our constitutional right to privacy and the trust that underpins our entire postal system. You see, a sealed letter is not just another object in the mail stream. It's a private conversation on paper, a direct, sometimes intimate exchange. Parcels contain goods. Letters carry thoughts, medical updates, legal documents, family news. Opening a letter is not like inspecting a box of merchandise. It's like eavesdropping on a private conversation in someone's home. That is why the Supreme Court of Canada has consistently held that mail attracts a high expectation of privacy under Section 8 of the Charter, which guarantees the right to be secure against unreasonable search or seizure. It's also why Section 187 of the Criminal Code prohibits intercepting private communications without judicial authorization. That's a warrant. Privacy is essential to liberty. Our Charter, our Criminal Code, and repeated Supreme Court of Canada rulings all recognize that a sealed letter sent through government postal service attracts a high expectation of privacy. Yet this bill suggests that the government disagrees with that. The current framework is a deliberate balance. Canada Post can inspect parcels when needed to enforce customs rules or keep dangerous goods out of circulation. And then they can alert law enforcement to get a warrant if there are reasonable grounds to believe an offense has occurred or will occur, and that evidence of the offense will be found at the location to be searched. But no one, and I mean no one, can pry open a sealed letter unless a judge has first issued a warrant based on reasonable grounds. This bill will change that, and it smacks of government overreach. If the government wanted to accomplish their goals with minimal impairment, if they wanted to put small parcels that qualify as mail on the same footing as larger parcels, they could have made a distinction between letters, as we know them, and something thicker or small packages that are under 500 grams that still fit through that letter slot when you go to the post office. But they did not. Even then, by the way, Mr. Speaker, they would have had to reckon with the fact that at least one court in Canada has already held that the provision that they're trying to change violates the Charter's privacy rights. This change is a change we disagree with vehemently. This change is a litigation magnet. And I submit to you, Mr. Speaker, that the courts are going to spend millions of Canadians' taxpayer dollars litigating it with little chance of success. And so I rise today to ask the government to please abandon its effort to take those 4 little words out of the Act. During the long summer recess this government gave us, I spoke with and heard from many community members in my riding on this issue. They do not want to see this change. Allowing Canada Post to open letters will erode the public trust on which the Postal Service depends at a time when the Postal Service, quite frankly, cannot afford to lose more of the public trust. And it is unnecessary. If there are genuine safety concerns with small packages that are under 500 grams that fit through the letter slot, modern, non-intrusive screening exists. X-ray imaging, chemical detection, and targeted investigation under judicial oversight. These tools protect the public while respecting constitutional right. Blanket powers, on the other hand, worry the public and invite abuse. That is why these 4 little words, except for a letter, are so powerful. Do we, as a free and democratic society, accept that others may open and perhaps read our private letters without a judge's authorization or before a judge's authorization? If yes, We normalize warrantless intrusion into one of our most intimate forms of communication. If no, we reaffirm that privacy is not a privilege, but a right, central to our values and fundamental to the relationship between citizen and state. Mr. Speaker, the government has no business rifling through the private letters of Canadians. Our constitutions, our statutes, and our shared values say the same thing. A sealed letter is sacred. It deserves the same constitutional respect as the home from which it came and the home to which it is bound. I urge all members of this House to reject any proposal that weakens that protection. Let us preserve the trust that has carried Canadians' words, hopes, and memories across this country for generations. To borrow a phrase familiar to every household, when it comes to our letters, the only thing that should be opened is the mailbox. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, when I met with Commissioner Carrick at the summit that I was talking about this summer, he wanted to point out to me that today a letter under 500 grams of fentanyl is not a letter that could contain anything like fentanyl under 500 grams is not subject to a search warrant. This bill allows it to be subject to a search warrant. I would remind the member across that 200 milligrams can be deadly for humans. We need to tackle this crisis of fentanyl in our country, and we need to give police the tools that are necessary. Would the member not agree that we need to provide our policing agencies with the tools that are necessary to fight fentanyl?
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for her question. I live in a community that is deeply affected by the addictions crisis, and I share the government's desire to stop fentanyl in its tracks. We propose to try and treat fentanyl dealers as murderers. Yes. This government proposes to open all Canadians' mail, or to be able to open all Canadians' mail in the hope of being able to find things in it. I will leave it to Canadians watching this debate at home to decide which will be more effective.
Question et commentaire. Questions and comments. The member for Kamloops Thompson Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure to rise on behalf of the people from Kamloops, Thompson Nicola, and the minister just mentioned something, and she asked my colleague a question about fentanyl. And the Liberals talk about tackling fentanyl, and yet people under the Liberals who traffic in fentanyl can serve their sentences at home. Guns and drugs go hand in hand, and in Bill C-5, these Liberals allowed people to serve their sentence on house arrest for drive-by shootings. Now, I wonder if my honourable colleague would agree with me that it's a bit rich that the Liberals now want to tackle fentanyl through these measures in the mail when they won't get hard on the issues that are killing people today, the drugs and guns.
I'm a member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
I want to thank my colleague for his question. I mean, I echo his sentiments. I'm not sure that I have an answer that would disagree with him. And I'd like this government to act with respect to fentanyl on a broad array of measures. What I would particularly like to see is, I ran on a promise of bringing our loved ones home drug-free. And what I'd really like to see this government do is I would like them to commit to providing the funding that will allow us to provide the treatment and recovery beds that we need in our ridings to be able to do that.
Hear, hear.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if the member could be really clear on this point. Today, if I put a letter in the mailbox and there's fentanyl in it, the Canada Post has a legal obligation to deliver that letter, wherever it is in Canada. Now, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that in order for the law enforcement agency to open up that letter, they require a warrant, and they get a warrant in order to open up that letter. Does she or the Conservative Party support that principle?
The honourable member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. Of course, I support the process that currently exists, where law enforcement has to get warrants to be able to search people's property, including their mail. To the extent that law enforcement has reasonable grounds to believe that a crime has been committed or is going to be committed, they already have the tools to be able to do that in a court of law. I'm not sure what the member thinks he's adding through this change.
We have time for a very brief question. The member for Swift Currents, Kindersley, Grasslands, 20 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The RCMP know where thousands of these drug labs are across Canada. I don't think it'd be that hard of a process for them to be able to get the warrant that they need to be able to search the product. Does the member not agree that there are already measures in place that can be used if the government would actually have the will and the tone that they're setting towards how they treat drugs in this country would actually be of great help as well?
For Nanaimo, Ladysmith, a very brief answer.
Thank you. Regulatory search powers often overlap with law enforcement, and this is a question of whether you inspect first and then get a warrant, or you get a warrant and then inspect. The law, as it stands, is fine and clear.
In debate, please du débat. The honourable member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, in June, Canadians pleaded with this Liberal government to keep Parliament open and deliver real bail reform. They refused, and they went on vacation. And while they were away, tragedy multiplied. A 3-year-old girl assaulted in her own bed. A boy killed by a stray bullet as he slept in his mother's arms. A father slain while defending his family. A grandmother murdered for her car. Each story is a heartbreak. Each one a question. Why was the Liberals' vacation more important than protecting Canadians from crime? Now Parliament is finally back. It's day 2. And what does the government put first? Not violent crime, not unemployment, not the cost of living, not housing affordability. Instead, they rush forward with a bill to let the state seize your mail without a warrant, to reach into your digital life unnecessarily and without oversight. And yet, when I walk the streets of Newmarket, Aurora, when I knock on doors, I do not hear calls for broader surveillance powers. I hear a mother in tears telling me that she no longer feels safe in her own home. I read emails. I take calls from neighbors who tell me with desperation that they no longer feel safe in their homes, in their streets, in their country. Canadians are asking, can I feed my family? Will my children ever be able to afford a home? Are our streets safe? That is what weighs on the people's hearts. And yet this government answers with an omnibus bill that ignores their pleas and fiddles with their freedoms. Violent crime is up 50%. Gang-related homicides up 75%. Extortion 357%. Auto theft 46%. Crimes against children up 119%.
Shameful.
Every percentage point is not a number, it's a person. It's a life appended, a family scarred. There are parts of this bill where we will find common ground. We support tougher measures to combat fentanyl. We support expanding the sex offenders registry so police can prevent the most horrific crimes. We support stronger powers for law enforcement to stop predators and for CBSA to stop money laundering and terrorist financing. These are urgent. These could pass now. But the government went further. They bundled urgent, non-contentious issues with controversial ones that overreach. Section 8 of our Charter is clear. Canadians are protected against unlawful search and seizure. The protection must come before the state acts, not after. The private information of Canadians sent through mail should never be handed to the government without a warrant. That is a clear breach of confidentiality. Think about what we entrust to the mail: mailing ballots, confidential files, financial statements. Where's the line? Where is the respect for Canadian civil liberties? When I hear of a government screening mail, I don't think of a Western democracy. I think of a place where the state controls, where people are afraid to speak their minds. That is not Canada. And yet, that is exactly what this bill proposes. The reality is, criminals are savvy. They adapt, they shift, they change, and they will. We have already seen cases of pigeons delivering drugs in BC, and we know the use of drones are rapidly growing. Criminals will find other ways. And what will be left behind? Ordinary Canadians, their liberties, civil liberties, stripped away. Their private letters, their ballots, their most personal information left open to the government's eyes. Not through due process, not with a warrant, but a will. That is not the Canada we know. That is not the Canada we should ever accept. This bill offers no real oversight, no safeguards, no consequences for abuse. And Canadians know this. Once liberties are handed away, they are rarely returned. There is something else, Mr. Speaker. Tacked inside this bill, quiet but troubling, restrictions on the use of cash. For generations, cash has been more than a currency. It has been independence. It has been a safeguard for seniors who don't bank online, for small businesses that still trade hand-to-hand, predominantly in the retail sector, for families who rely on it in times of emergency. This government once froze Canadians' bank accounts. Now it moves to limit the cash in their pockets. That is not financial modernization. That is control. Cash is not the problem, criminals are. And so Canadians deserve to know, why is a government that cannot control their spending so eager to control how Canadians spend? Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve a parliament that deals with the real concerns: safe streets, affordable living, and stable jobs, while preserving the liberties that define us. Conservatives will support practical, effective measures that protect families, that will support stronger borders, tougher penalties, and real action against fentanyl. But we will not support a government that uses fear as a cover for overreach, that buries necessary policy inside sweeping new powers. Let us pass what unites us. Let us set aside what divides us. And let us spend this chamber's precious time on the things that Canadians are truly asking of us: safety, prosperity, and freedom. That is where Conservatives will stand. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the member that safety is paramount and very of concern to Canadians. That is why the second bill that we tabled in this Parliament was C2. Bail reform and sentencing reforms are also upcoming this fall. But I would like to know if the member is supportive of C2, as she didn't reference it too much in her speech. So I'd love to know if she's supportive of the extra measures and tools that we're giving our law enforcement. This bill was created off of recommendations from officers that serve on the front lines.
Member for Newmarket, Aurora.
I laid out very clearly my concerns with the bill, predominantly around the violation of civil liberties for Canadians, government overreach, and their desire for control. That is what we don't agree with. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, criminals will adapt, and they will adapt quickly. They will change their methods. We have seen, like I said, pigeons and drones. And what will be left behind will be ordinary, law-abiding Canadians with their liberties violated. We will never support that.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. Member for Oshawa.
Thank you so much for this heartfelt and compassionate and thoughtful speech. I'm proud to be part of a caucus that cares that our loved ones come home. We talk about borders. The member before talked about living in a border town. I've heard all day members on the opposite side telling us how proud they are that this is the most money ever promised to be spent on border security. They're so proud of that. Yet I have to ask, and I think this member can comfortably comment on, why are we in the place we are right now where we have to spend that kind of money now to try to fix the problem?
The honourable member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Would you like to look at the public
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my colleague. I do not understand how a government can stand time and time again and applaud after their failures and say that they are actually trying to save Canadians from themselves. What I do want to mention, though, is that I knocked on thousands of doors in Newmarket, Aurora, and I heard the concerns of my constituents, and they are around violent crime. If I was to go back to that mother that lost her child and say, we are finally back in session, 22 days this entire year, and what are we debating? Whether this government can search through your mail, whether they can control your cash, she will say, please, listen to the people and the priorities. I am terrified in my own home. Clean up our streets. That's that priorities that Canadians have communicated to us.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Adaptation is a concern of ours, and that is why in this legislation, as we are finding that more and more criminals are using our mail to mail pieces that put together firearms, but also to mail fentanyl, which is mailed in such small quantities. This was a loophole that was being used by many criminals, so we must adapt. Would the member not agree that we need to adapt and catch these criminals?
The honourable member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, I spent 15 years in the financial sector, and I can tell you with full confidence, criminals will move way faster than this government can ever move. Exactly. And what will be left over is ordinary, law-abiding Canadians with their civil liberties violated, in a government that can go into anyone's mail without a warrant, just a will, and violate people's privacy. I don't support that.
Thank you. Time for a very brief question. The honourable member for Edmonton West, about 20 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for an excellent speech. The government was just talking about adapting for criminality. Should perhaps the government adapt to keeping prisoners in jail instead of releasing violent offenders immediately on bail?
No, member for Newmarket, Aurora, a very brief response.
I thank my member for the question. I would have the same question for this Liberal government that has failed to deliver real bail reform. And I'm glad that Conservatives have tough on crime. We have a member that is working on bail reform. I'm very much looking forward to that. And I've been sharing that with people in my riding. I can tell you they want a serious government to tackle violent crime.
Reprise du débat. L'honorable.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Rimouski, La Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, securing our borders is not a luxury.
All right, gang, just give me a moment here. Sorry, I had to turn off the lights. It's been a long couple of days in front of just the lights. Yesterday was so much fun. Let's see what we can find here. So that's a 25. So we need to go to 40. Oh, yes. All right. Too bad you're leaving right now, Arnold. We've got Melissa Lanceman.
Sure, if they
right
just pulled this figure out of a hat. They don't need 1,000, they need 2,000 to 3,000.
Resuming debate. Please debate the honourable member for Thornhill.
We're back today again to do something we do a lot in this place. Cleaning up yet another mess that the Liberal government for the last 10 years created. This time we're tackling a broken border security regime that lets guns and drugs and criminals flow across the border with absolutely no consequences. Tie that together with an equally broken criminal justice system that provides no accountability for the offenders and no safety for innocent Canadians. And you get a disaster crisis level mess. How did we get here? Well, that's pretty simple. We'll walk you right through it for everybody watching, for them who might listen this time around. We'll start with Justin Trudeau and his ministers, who, by the way, are still there on the front bench, who prefer giving rights to criminals instead of law-abiding Canadians. Pieces of legislation like C5 and C75 that codify this ideology and let convicted criminals roam free through a revolving door justice system of bail with no punishments and no accountability whatsoever. We see it every single day, every story on the news, story 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, particularly in my region of the GTA. And then pile on weak immigration policies that deliver outcomes like a 632% increase in people trying to cross illegally into the country from the U.S. Sprinkle on a healthy dose of free drugs courtesy of the taxpayer, available to anyone, anywhere, and even when we know these drugs end up in the streets or in our schools, and frankly make the plight of addiction much worse and not better. And then top it all off with a broken federal bureaucracy that is ballooned, so weak and so detached from reality that literal terrorist organizations in some case can fundraise and recruit and operate with impunity here in Canada from coast to coast to coast. Some of them even still have charitable numbers. It doesn't take a genius to realize that all of these ingredients would set you up for a ginormous, I'm not sure if that's a word, but a ginormous border security and crime crisis in this country. And you get stories like Raj Kumar Memi, convicted of smuggling 80 kilos of cocaine in 2023, sentenced to 15 years, released, escaped, hopped on a plane, and now is gone forever. Or Arjun Sanin, a 19-year-old. He was arrested for drive-by shootings and extortion, got bail, booked a flight, and now he's gone too. This is the reality of a system that the Liberals designed. Like, they actually designed this. They thought about it and thought that these were good changes, which resulted in the chaos. But apparently, no one on that side saw the things like this coming. Not even from a mile away or from their work-from-home setups. Flash forward to right now, a few months later, and what do we see? Once again, the Liberal government is showing up with a bill that actually doesn't deliver on what Canadians want and what they've asked for and what they're screaming about in the streets. A bill that claims to fix a problem, but instead proposes things that no Canadian would ever sign off on. They've cooked up legislation that keeps a broken border and immigration regime in place, while also punishing law-abiding citizens with massive expansions in federal power. C2 keeps the catch and release for criminals who traffic fentanyl and firearms in place and takes advantage of the weak laws that hurt Canadians. It doesn't add mandatory prison time for fentanyl traffickers. It doesn't add mandatory prison time for gangsters who use guns to commit crimes. And there have been several shootings in my community in Vaughan. In just 3 weeks, there's been 7. An innocent man literally gave his life to save his family from a random violent home invasion. He was shot to death in his living room. But the legislation won't guarantee that his killers or any other people terrorizing our communities are actually behind bars. We get the wait, it's going to happen. The same people who created the crisis cannot be trusted to fix it. Even worse, it still allows
house arrest for even the most serious offenses. You can commit grand theft auto and still be in your living room playing the video game. At the same time, C2 puts new limits on the use of cash on our economy, ostensibly to target guns and criminals. But do we really believe that guns and criminals, the ones pushing fentanyl, the ones running guns, laundering money, are suddenly going to start following the law? Of course not. You make those assertions and you make criminals out of law-abiding citizens. Instead, it's seniors and small businesses who will be unfairly punished by this massive overreach in government power. It even goes further. Massive new powers of the federal government that threaten Canadian civil liberties. And we know this. We've seen this movie before. It's what they do every single time. They find a problem, they don't solve the actual problem, and then they massively expand their power to take more rights away from Canadians. We've seen how this happens. There is no limit to this government's hunger for power. They tried to give themselves unlimited spending power during COVID. Just 2 months ago, they sneakily removed privacy provisions from the online streaming bill and called it an accident. And now they're bearing conditions in the back of this bill that have nothing to do with border security and only further clearly show Canadians that they want more power. This isn't just overblown rhetoric. C2 will let Ottawa open people's mail without oversight, force internet companies to hand over private information, and allow them to to search without a warrant in certain scenarios. That's not fixing our borders. It's not protecting Canadians. It is a government power grab, plain and simple, and it should make everybody very, very uncomfortable. Conservatives did not give this prime minister, or frankly, Canadians did not give this prime minister a blank check to take more power away from Canadians to infringe on their rights. Here's what he's doing. I'll say, here's what we should do instead in this bill. We should hire more border agents, the one that are on the front lines, like was done in the past, so they can properly patrol the entire Canadian border. Not in an Ottawa office, but on the ground, with people in uniforms that would enforce the laws that are there. Let's install scanners at major ports to stop the flow of guns and stolen cars in and out of our country. Maybe we should actually keep track of who's coming in and who's leaving this country, so maybe we don't have another situation where the government actually loses count of everybody that they've let in. The soft on crime provisions in C5 and C75 that should put criminals in jail, restore the rule of law again in our country, rather than letting them out on bail minutes, hours, or days after they commit a crime. And while we're at it, let's stop handing out lethal drugs for free, paid for by the taxpayers, and put people in actual treatment. Mr. Speaker, the government is coming here to talk a big game about this bill, but once again, their actions don't match their words. Maybe if the public safety minister should have, right, I guess the public safety minister should probably have a conversation with the justice minister, because he doesn't seem to think there's a problem with crime at all. He mocked Canadians who are fed up with what's going on in their communities, in their neighborhoods, in their homes, in their businesses. He might not think that Canada is the Wild West, but where people are being shot in their own homes, when cars are getting carjacked at random, when people are being mugged in the streets, it is a lot closer to the Wild West than we should ever be comfortable with here. This is a guy who broke the housing market, who broke the long-held consensus on our immigration system, and now he's putting his talents to use at the Justice Department. And I hope that we spare all Canadians of that being a very, very long time. And to get to the core of what's at this Liberal government is you put the same people in charge who broke everything in order to fix it. And the way that they fix it is they bring forward a bill They tell you that they have good intentions in the bill, and yet it is a power grab. It is a power grab to look at your mail, to ban cash, to do things that they never had power to do before, all under the guise of protecting Canadians and protecting our border. And everybody should look at that very, very seriously. Everybody should look at their intentions very, very seriously with this bill. They say they're going to do one thing, they do the exact opposite, and there are no results ever for this. Thank you.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to take a second to give my deepest condolences and sympathy to the Abdul Aleem Faruqi family. What happened to him and his family is outrageous. It is something that angers me as well, and is something that we are making sure doesn't happen to anyone else in the future. We're going to do everything possible in our upcoming justice reform legislation to make sure that the changes that are recommended by our policing agencies are undertaken. But when it comes to C2 is the bill that we're talking about today, that our Stronger Borders Act. I'd like to know if the member opposite is willing to vote in favor of this legislation, as it gives police agencies the tools necessary to crack down on organized crime.
The member from Thornhill.
Appreciate the question, but police agencies right across the country have been asking this government for bail reform when they destroyed the justice system. And this minister was in the last government who did exactly that. They've heard from police associations, they've heard from mayors across the country, and they did nothing. And they say that it's coming tomorrow. But how many more people have to be victimized in their community before tomorrow comes? That's the point that the minister should answer in this House during this debate.
Questions and comments.
The Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her excellent speech. Colleague mentioned something about the rising crime in Vaughan Woodbridge. Madam Speaker, people are legitimately afraid in their own homes in our community. And I was wondering if my colleague could elaborate on the lack of attention that's been paid since the election, frankly, and far before that, to this very serious issue.
Thornhill.
My colleague comes from the community where Mr. Faruqi was from, who stood with Conservatives during a press conference calling for the very things that the Liberals have broken. That's right. This has gone on far too long for far too many families, and you don't have to be a victim directly of violent crime. It changes the way that you live. It changes your behavior. It changes the fact that you have fear of living in your once safe community. If they don't understand that and they make fun of Canadians for calling it the Wild West, then I don't know what we're doing here.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg South
Centre. Thank you, Madam
Sorry.
Speaker. Just a question for my colleague, because I know we're veering a little bit into what sounds like a conversation about bail reform, which is appropriate given the context of this legislation and what the Justice Minister has been talking about. I wonder if she may have some commentary to add in regards to the role that she believes, in addition to a very significant amount of work ahead of us as a federal government, but the role that provincial governments have to play. In many instances, I know that judges that are using their discretion for folks that are being released are provincial appointees. So some changes to the criminal code, of course, are necessary, but there are administration of justice components as well. I'm wondering if she can comment on the role that she feels provincial governments have, in addition, of course, to that of the federal government. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Thornhill.
I welcome the member back for his second term, which he should know that the federal criminal code is administered out of this place, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about things like C5, like C75, that take that onerous provision out, that allow weak bail. We're talking about this in light of C2 because they've allowed they've allowed chaos in our streets. And we will continue talking about crime every single day of the week when they can trying to convince Canadians that they're the ones trying to fix it.
Member for Calgary Carlton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to the member for Thornhill. It almost would seem like the Liberals across from us are just wondering, why are these provincial courts
not restraining people after they passed a law that required and imposed the least restraint. So since it was the Secretary of State for Public Safety that introduced this to the debate, I'd like you to maybe comment further, like the member to comment, if she would, on this, on the Liberals' response.
Brief answer from the honourable member for Thornhill.
The member well knows, and I'm sure that would be news to the members on the other side, that provincial judges interpret federal laws right out of the criminal code. That's how it works. But today we're talking about the very fact that these Liberals who have let crime, chaos, drugs, disorder, a crisis in our immigration system, a crisis in our housing system, a crisis in cost of living get out of control, and they believe that they're the ones to fix it, I'm not...
We're out of time. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Windsor West.
Good evening, Madam Speaker. It is an honour and a privilege to rise in this House at the start of this parliamentary session on behalf of the great people of Windsor West. But more importantly, I'm here to speak on their behalf in this chamber. Before I get to the matter at hand, I would like to speak about the workers of Titan Tool and Die in Windsor, men and women of Unifor 195 who have dedicated on an average 35 plus years of their lives to this factory, which was built by the late Joseph Sachet, a proud Canadian and a pioneer of manufacturing in Windsor. Today, these workers are locked out while the employer moves jobs and investment capital to the United States. And why? Not because of tariffs or trade barriers, but because government policies that have made it easier and more profitable for Canadian companies to send work and investment south. This is the reality the Liberals have created. Constant talk about supporting Canadian workers, yet policies that incentivize moving jobs and critical investment out of Canada. The people of Windsor built this company. The Liberals' failure to protect these workers is a failure of Labour leadership. I call on the employer to return to the bargaining table with the union, and I call on this government to finally put Canadian jobs first before they are lost forever. Now, with respect to Bill C-2, I'm not just going to speak about it as a member of Parliament for Windsor West, but as someone who has spent nearly 3 decades serving as a police officer. I patrolled our streets, answered the calls, and I also served in the Marine unit along our international border. I know of many colleagues in Windsor, Essex, who serve as police officers and CBSA officers, who have intercepted shipments of drugs and weapons before they reached our streets. This is real frontline police work, which results in lives saved and communities protected. Let me share one story that illustrates why we cannot be satisfied with half measures. Not long ago, a Toronto man was convicted for smuggling over $36 million worth of drugs into Canada. That was this year that he was convicted. Of this, over $23 million worth of his meth was seized at the Windsor-Detroit Bridge. Despite the scale of his crime, he was allowed to remain out of jail for nearly 6 months until the birth of his child, before finally serving his sentence. This was based on a joint submission by the Crown prosecutor and the defense lawyer and approved by a judge. They all patted themselves on the back for being compassionate citizens, which is very commendable. But, Madam Speaker, where is the compassion for the families who have lost loved ones to these drugs? Where is the compassion for parents burying their children? For communities terrorized by gangs, dealers, and the violence that follows them, where is their compassion? Bill C-2 fails to address these realities. It waters down penalties for serious drug offenses and violent crimes while doing little for victims or the families who are left to pick up the shattered pieces of their lives. When I speak with former colleagues, whether police officers or CBSA officers, the frustration is very clear. They see traffickers and gangbangers treated with leniency, And they also see that some prosecutors are rushing to throw the book at ordinary Canadians who are defending a family member from an armed home invader. Does that sound like justice to you? Not to me, Madam Speaker. Some people are asking us, why are some prosecutors, or the police for that matter, timid when it comes to organized crime and repeat violent offenders, but fearless or even punitive when it comes to law-abiding citizens defending their families? These are the questions victims, families, and even frontline police officers are asking us every day. Even experts and legal practitioners have raised alarms that this bill is light on consequences. My colleague, the member for Kamloops Thompson Nicola, a former prosecutor, has already highlighted a lack of serious penalties. Without meaningful consequences, the message is clear. Crime pays and victims don't matter at all. The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police emphasizes the need for balance. Yes, that is needed. They support prevention and treatment, but they also know, like any other police officer and us here, that enforcement matters. Without enforcement, without accountability, we are left responding to overdoses, chasing repeat offenders, and watching our social fabric unravel. And let us be very clear, Madam Speaker, Windsor West is on the front line of these challenges. Every illegal gun smuggled across our border, every fentanyl pill pressed and sold on our streets puts our families at risk, and not just in Windsor, in the rest of Canada. Instead of giving prosecutors and law enforcement stronger tools, this bill sends the opposite signal, that Canada is a soft target and our justice system bends instead of standing firm. Another aspect of this bill that raises legitimate concern among Canadians is privacy. We value the freedoms and privacy of every Canadian. No one should fear that their personal correspondence or packages can be opened arbitrarily. It is absolutely true that we cannot and must not ignore the threats posed by illegal drugs, firearms, and organized crime. Law enforcement must have the tools to investigate serious criminal activity, but only in a targeted, high-risk context and always with proper judicial oversight. Strong safeguards, transparency, and accountability are essential to ensure Canadians' rights are respected. And, Madam Speaker, there is a deeper concern here, our sovereignty. Buried in this bill are provisions that could allow the government to enter into agreements with foreign states. I've heard from many constituents about this issue. These agreements that may compel Canadian service providers to hand over information about our citizens. Civil liberties experts have warned that this framework risks weakening judicial oversight, especially if it links to treaties like the Budapest Protocol or the US-style data sharing arrangements. We cannot have this. When we make it clear that it is easier for foreign authorities to access Canadians' private information without full and transparent judicial scrutiny, we are not just eroding our privacy and that of our citizens, we are giving up a piece of our sovereignty. Protecting our borders should not mean handing over control of our citizens' data. The Liberal government has had nearly a decade to act decisively on crime and border security. But what we see instead are half measures and weak enforcement. Families are losing children to overdoses, communities live in fear of violent repeat offenders, and frontline officers are frustrated that the laws tie their hands while criminals exploit loopholes. Conservatives believe in compassion, but compassion without accountability is weakness. If we want safer streets and stronger communities, we need both prevention and firm enforcement. We need all our prosecutors to take criminals seriously, not just some of them. We need police and CBSA officers to have the resources and our backing so they can use their powers effectively. We need penalties that match the harm that these criminals cause. Canadians deserve better. We will continue to stand with victims, families, and the frontline officers who put themselves in harm's way every day to defend our communities. Madam Speaker, Windsor-Essex is a community of builders, protectors, and entrepreneurs. We deserve a government that stands with our workers, supports our frontline officers, and protects our families from criminals who prey on them. We Conservatives will fight for safer streets, stronger borders, and a truly sovereign nation that answers to its own people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I heard in the member opposite's comments, he talked about the importance of privacy of Canadians, which we believe in. I had an opportunity this summer to talk to an RCMP member in my community, and he was explaining to me why this portion of the bill is really important. He talked about the fact that he worked in Yukon, and he took a week away. In 1 week, one package came in, and there was one case of overdose, and only in 1 week he saw 700 cases. Can the member maybe talk about why RCMP are calling for us to bring this measure into this bill to make sure that we can reduce overdoses in communities like Yukon?
The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Thank you for that question from the member opposite. Madam Speaker, there are many things that we need to do to fix our system, our judicial system, our postal system. But targeting people and their mail through these measures is not the answer. There has to be better options, better scanners, better things that we can use to intercept, rather than just use a blanket opportunity to go after every piece of mail out there to say this is how we're going to treat all our citizens as suspects. That is not how we should treat our people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for Northumberland, Clark.
Thank you to the member for his excellent speech. In my community, I have certainly seen issues with the bail reform put in place by the Liberal government, where we've had individuals commit assaults and be out on the street in the same day and commit those type of events, those type of awful crimes again. I'm just wondering if he's seen any of the impacts of the terrible Liberal criminal legislation in his riding.
Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Thank you to my colleague for that question. Madam Speaker, one of the reasons I got involved and came to this chamber is exactly for that reason, that I'm sick and tired of us being constant victims. We need to stand up to these criminal elements. We need to be able to stand up to organized crime, and we need to stand up to defend ourselves. And I would love and appreciate if the Liberal government did something about this, rather than us keep telling our folks that, sorry, we're trying our best. As a salesman of the justice system, in my previous life, I told folks, this is not a good product, and I hated to say that. That is not who we are. That is not how our country should be defined, Madam Speaker.
Comments, the Honourable Secretary of State.
23. Many of these parcels have been found, these letters have been found to contain illicit drugs, fentanyl, weapons. Does the member not think that the government, Canada Post, inspectors, police should have the authority to be able to seek a warrant if these types of substances are killing Canadians?
Well, Member for Windsor West.
Without proper judicial authorization, we become a lawless country, Madam Speaker. We have to have some safeguards in place so that we can do all these things. Yes, I absolutely believe that we should be able to catch the criminals who are sending, or using rather, the Canada Post system to send these drugs willy-nilly. That should not be an option for anybody. And if there's a better way they can come up with to stop these criminal elements, how about starting with a better intel system where we can identify the idiots who are sending all these things to poor Canadians who are victims of drug overdoses? Let's start with that.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Abbotsford, South Langley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to start off by saying I thank the members, all the constituents from Abbotsford South Langley, and I am honored to be here representing my community today. Madam Speaker, citizens of my riding have been advocating for stronger laws and stronger borders. I appreciate that this bill is trying to tackle high crime rates, but the bill in its current form is unacceptable. It has taken 10 years for the Liberals to put forward this bill, and if it's passed, crime rates will continue to rise in our communities, and for individual freedoms, they will be bulldozed by this Liberal government. My riding encompasses borders to the United States, Sumas border and Aldergrove border, which fall within my riding, and it is close to the Pacific Ocean ports as well. In British Columbia, fentanyl continues to be devastating in all of our communities. According to Health Canada, close to 50,000 Canadians have died from apparent opioid toxicity between January of 2016 to June 2024. Of all accidental opioid deaths in the first half of 2024, 79% involved fentanyl. In November of 2024, police uncovered a super lab in Langley within my community. It was capable of producing multiple kilograms of fentanyl every single week. Despite these alarming facts, the Liberals and the government refuses to fix Canada's broken jail system. See, my community members believe that those who are profiting from this poisoning and that are poisoning our community members, especially the children within our communities, should belong behind bars. And if this government was serious about protecting our borders and our neighbors, and the neighborhoods that involve within their communities, it would ensure that the moving of fentanyl into the communities carries real jail time. This bill does not address any mandatory minimums. It maintains house arrests for serious crimes and includes no minimum sentencing on those who commit sexual assault against younger children. Since 2015, sexual violations against children have gone up 118%. That is simply just disgraceful. If we can't protect our children, if our families can't protect our children, and if we, being here, can't protect our children, who will? Bill C-2 demonstrates a larger issue in Canadian policy. The Liberal government will look over serious crimes, including crimes against children, without any ramifications, and if passed in its current stage, Bill C-2 will allow criminals to keep taking advantage of Canadians. Crime rates of extortion and sex-related crimes are growing dramatically, and we need to bring real change, and we need it now. So if this so-called Strong Borders Act was serious about protecting our borders, it would increase mandatory minimums for drug traffickers. Currently, the mandatory minimum is only 1 year. How could our borders be truly strong if those who are trafficking toxic drugs are not being punished properly? Drug trafficking and the drug traffickers are bringing death sentences to our communities. 1 year in jail is insulting the victims of dangerous crimes. But it is not surprising that considering that this party is the one that supported decriminalization of fentanyl within my province. Why is it that the more this government fails to address real criminality, it simultaneously increases the targeting of innocent law-abiding citizens? The reality is, Canada is desperate for tougher policies on crime. And since 2015, violent crimes have gone up 50%. Homicides are up by 27%. Sexual assaults are up by 75%, and 90% of those are committed against women. The Liberals should be ashamed, especially as they claim to champion support of women. Violent firearms and offenses of them are up by 116%, and gun regulations don't stop criminals acquiring firearms. They only hurt law-abiding citizens. Since 2015, extortion is up 357%. Auto theft is up 45%, and human trafficking is up 84%. See, the bottom line here is that the Liberals cared about strengthening our borders, they would jail the traffickers. and there will be immediate drop in crime with illegal weapons such as extortion and armed robberies. Bill C-2, if passed in its current form, it will allow gangsters and traffickers to continue to cause chaos and tragedy within my riding. Madam Speaker, this bill has the government warrantless power over Canadians' mail. The Liberals seem perfectly fine with intercepting private letters and packages of law-abiding Canadians. This is not public safety. This is government overreach. Bill C-2 then targets the use of cash of our own legal tender based on hypothetical crimes. And while the Liberals say stay soft on crime policies, stay in touch. Extortion, auto theft, human trafficking, these are the real crimes that are surging. And this government is yet more interested in regulating what is in our wallets and in our mail. Drug dealers won't be stopped by this bill. They'll simply just move their operation to different forms and different systems. Money laundering won't be stopped either. They'll just find new ways to move their cash as well. The only people who get squeezed are the honest Canadians who pay their bills and send packages. Madam Speaker, Canadians want real change, and they want criminals behind bars, and not more government control over their mail and money. Under this legislation, the government reserves the right to force the hand of Canadians and internet companies to surrender sensitive data without a warrant. See, our police can't search our homes without warrants or probable cause, so why should they be allowed to search our private communications without one? That is not just an attack on privacy, but it goes against free speech and expression, both which are protected by the Charter of Right and Freedom. Madam Speaker, I want to conclude on the end of the note that I completely agree with our current parliamentary secretary and the leader of the government who once sat in opposition and said, and I quote, "Could the minister assure that who are listening to the debate that government does not in any fashion whatsoever allow for any sort of invasion of privacy without some sort of judicial court warrant to enable police to do so?" The Liberals once understood the policy, and today they're shredding it. Canadians want criminals behind bars and their freedom to not be bargained away. And Bill C-2 bulldozes liberties and letting criminals off the hook, and that's why we will not stand for it. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member opposite mentioned extortions. I know extortions have increased in his community. It's a concern that I have, and I'm glad the member shares it as well. This piece of legislation, C2, if we're talking about C2, allows police to be able to identify a phone number to the person that has that phone number, being able to get basic subscriber information from the telco company, meaning name, and address. This is a very important tool that law enforcement has been asking for so that their investigations are not delayed or they can rule people out. Will the member not feel that being able to speed up extortion investigations is an important tool that we should give law enforcement?
Honourable Member for Abbotsford Southland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague from across the aisle. And I would like to question back that if they were so concerned about extortion, they would have supported my colleague's bill of extortion, addressing all the concerns, and they would have voted in favor of it instead of opposing it. So we are here fighting for Canadians. We are voicing their concerns, and I know on a first-hand basis the damage that is being done by the Liberal policies. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Calgary Heritage? Yeah.
Me? Or,
yes?
Oh, Richmond Hill South.
Yes. Richmond Hill South. Oh. Yes, Richmond Hill South.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals call this bill the Stronger Borders Act. Well, Canadians do want secure borders. Something that the Liberals have opened up in the last 10 years through their intentional policies. And why do Canadians want to secure the border? Because at the root of the issue, it comes down to public safety. Again, something that the Liberals have completely shattered in the last 10 years with their pro-crime policies that have unleashed unprecedented levels of crime onto our once safe communities. So my question is this. if the Liberals actually cared about public safety, why is there nothing in this bill about mandatory prison time for fentanyl traffickers who are killing people en masse to the tunes of tens of thousands? Why is there nothing in this bill about mandatory prison time for gangsters who are using guns to commit crimes? And lastly, why does this bill contain nothing about, permitting house arrest, which the Liberals have enabled through their soft on crime, pro-crime policies over the last 10 years, intentional pro-crime policies, when they purportedly want to deal with this public safety issue? Is this just another case of Liberal incompetence, or are they trying to mislead Canadians?
The Honourable Member for Abbotsford South Langley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleague from Richmond Hill. And yes, it is exactly what he has said is Liberal incompetency. We see that our communities are now facing challenges like no other time before. We see the incompetence has trickled down year after year after year, and the effects are more crucial now than we've ever seen before. We need to make sure that we secure our borders properly, bring forward proper bills and proper amendments that will make sure that we strengthen our justice system. And my Liberal is very, very right in the matter that he's, because he is facing the same challenges that we are in my community of Abbotsford South Langley. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to revert back to the member's quote when he said that and my principles in terms of getting a warrant. The problem the member is facing is he's listening to the Conservative in the back room there. They're wrong. In fact, if you take a look at the legislation, write your own speech. All you need to realize is that Canada Post has a legal obligation to deliver the mail. Now, in that delivery, Madam Speaker, they cannot open letters. If the legislation were to pass, if the law enforcement agency was to get a warrant, they would be able to open the letter. Fentanyl is being mailed today to all sorts of communities. That's why we need this. My principal position on this hasn't changed from years ago. Would he not agree in principle that if you get a warrant to open a letter, that is a good aspect of the legislation? And if the answer to that is he agrees, well, then maybe the Conservatives need to revisit their speaking notes.
A very brief answer from the Honourable Member for Abbotsford South Langley.
We need to make sure that we address the concerns that our citizens are facing. The BC province is facing fentanyl crisis like no other. And yes, a member across the aisle is correct. He needs to make sure that he is competent in what he's saying and stating like before, not only just addressing these, he was at one point, I would like to say the member across was right, and now he is not aligning with what he said years before.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Mission Mascouche, Abbotsford.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill C-2 is being promoted as a crime and security bill, border security bill, but it includes sweeping measures that touch on Canadians' private lives. In a data-driven world, it is of utmost importance that governments, citizens, and companies have the fundamental right to privacy protected. The issue with Bill C-2 is that it touches on so many details without enough language or safeguards in place to properly study each component in a way that serves the best interest of Canadians or the implications of the new language contained in this omnibus piece of legislation. While there are many parts of this bill that could be critiqued, I will focus on the privacy side. This is particularly important to me because in the last Parliament, I had the privilege of working on Industry Committee on Bill C-27, which attempted to update Canada's privacy laws. In that process, we sought to enshrine a fundamental right to privacy in legislation. We sought to establish world-leading protections and safeguards for children. We sought to define and limit the socially and commercially acceptable use of personal data. And we sought to strike a fine balance between commercial interests and the right of personal data to be protected under the ownership of its user. I can't help but think of the relationship to C2 and the sweeping powers it seeks to provide government that we sought to protect in the last Parliament. So, in my opinion, the Liberals have taken this opportunity to develop a secretive, sweeping surveillance regime into a bill that was supposed to be about border and crime issues in response to the tariff challenges we faced from the United States. With that context in mind, let me turn to the specific parts of Bill C2 that warrant, in my opinion, further study on privacy concerns and are of greatest concerns to my constituents and experts alike who have written my office. Let's look at Part 14, an amendment to the Criminal Code under information demands. Part 14 creates a new law that lets police make information demands. This means police could ask internet or phone companies whether someone is a subscriber, even without a warrant. The standard for doing this in the legislation is very low. Police only need to have a reasonable suspicion. The Supreme Court has already said that's not enough when it comes to people's online account information. So that, in my opinion, may go against two very important recent Supreme Court decisions. In R versus Spencer, the Supreme Court ruled that Canadians have a right to privacy in their internet account details, and police need a warrant to access that information. In R versus Boykovets in 2024, the court made it clear that even things like IP addresses are private and also need a warrant to access. Part 14 would let police bypass these privacy protections. Part 15 of the Act, Supporting Authorized Access to Information Act. This creates a new category of electronic service providers and designates certain core providers. These companies would be forced to build and maintain technical backdoors at the request of law enforcement, allow law enforcement to test direct access to their systems, and keep all such requests secret from the public. Think about the implications of that. The government can tell a telco, an internet company that they're going to do things in private with people's personal data, and they don't have to inform the public. This has massive implications that need to be examined carefully. Part 16 of the Act rewrites Canada's privacy and financial rules. It touches upon the proceeds of crime, money laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act under sections 11.71 to 11.73. It creates a new part 1.2 of this law, allowing reporting entities such as banks, credit unions, and money services businesses to collect and use personal information without an individual's knowledge or consent if the data is provided by the government or law enforcement for purposes related to anti-money laundering, terrorist financing, or sanctions evasions. I will note in this request that we do need to improve this bill, but without some of the safeguards that Conservatives and even Liberal members were trying to establish in Bill C-27, it opens the door to future abuse and misuse by law enforcement agencies if these definitions and concepts of privacy and data are not modernized in Canada. Secondly, Personal Information and Protection Electronic Documents Act, Section 7 and 9. Under this portion of Part 16, it introduces exceptions so that the usual requirement for knowledge or consent no longer apply when collection or use is under the above provisions, namely the Terrorism and Financing Act. It also removes the obligation for individuals to access their own information if it was obtained under these rules. Essentially, this is allowing for banks and financial institutions to use Canadians' financial information without consent when the government supplies it. Think again about the implications this will have with the Canada Revenue Agency and financial institutions and the privacy of individuals, what this could do to the makeup of families, secret information or information that they want to keep private from other family members, not for criminal purposes, but maybe for business-related purposes. We have privacy in Canada for a reason. This law undermines it. I should say this bill undermines it. Part 11, cash transaction restrictions. Constituents in my community have raised concerns about the provisions related to cash transactions. Now, I know in many cases, in British Columbia especially, we have to, at casinos, at car dealerships, cash transactions have been abused. But there may be a better way that's outlined in this bill about how we treat cash moving forward. We have to think about the context of religious organizations who collect large amounts of cash at a weekly service at a Gurdwara or at a Christian church. We have to look at charities and auctions and the application it will have in those aspects of our society. And then finally, Madam Speaker, I would be remiss if I didn't quickly touch upon the Canada Post Act amendments. The Liberals think giving the ability of government to open your mail under very spurious grounds will serve Canada's interest. I would argue that we can find a middle ground. We can apply technology. We could speed up the use of warrants where necessary so that law enforcement does indeed have access to drugs that are mailed, such as fentanyl, in the Canada Post system. So in closing, Madam Speaker, this bill is litigation in action. I just can't imagine the number of court cases that are going to come from this legislation if we don't address these major privacy concerns, if we don't get the definitions correct, if the government is not very clear about the safeguards and the application of the things that they're proposing, which go well beyond everything they promised in the election, and in a way that Canadians aren't even aware of. This legislation needs careful scrutiny, Madam Speaker. So if this bill passes, I would encourage the minister to critically review whether the privacy and data collection aspect is even necessary for its core objectives about protecting our border. Now, coming from a border town, we want strong infrastructure at our border. We want to see more CBSA officers enforcing existing laws. We want to see the equipment and the military presence where necessary to keep Canadians safe. But this legislation goes well above and beyond the Canadian consensus about what we need to do to keep people safe today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Something that I was pretty devastated to learn earlier as I was studying or getting briefed up on the crime issue was that child sexual exploitation, sextortion, is one of the highest reported crimes in Canada currently today. And it's happening with Canadian offenders, it's happening across lines as well, across the world. And it's so important that we tackle this. One of the challenges that police are facing is that they have to be so far into an investigation and reasonable grounds to believe that a suspect has committed a crime, rather than the threshold that's being changed in this legislation, reasonable grounds to suspect, which allows officers to get basic information of who an IP address belongs to or a telephone number. And so I believe that it's very misleading when the member says that this will give them access to all of the suspect's data. That is not true. It's basic information. So I'd like it if the member would correct the facts.
Honourable Member for Mission Matsquiap.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't believe I need to correct any facts about the consequences of how this bill is written and the implications I sought to draw attention to. In our caucus, we have a former Crown prosecutor, the member from Kamloops, who spent his career combating sexual exploitation. And there are many other things we can do in the justice system that the Liberals have had 10 years to address related to evidence and discovery that many lawyers and Crown Counsel across Canada are asking for. So I would encourage the Liberal Justice Minister and other members of the caucus to look at existing things they can do right now, according to the Jordan's Principle as well, to speed up access to justice in this country, especially as it relates to the protection of minors. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for l'honorable député.
The honourable member for Rimouski-la-Matapédia. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to say hello to everyone who I proudly represent. There are people in Matapédia and Rimouski, but there are also the people of Les Basques and La Neigette, who I also represent, and I say hello to them as well. I have a simple question for my Conservative colleague. This bill would grant exceptional powers to the immigration minister. We want to ensure that Quebec's jurisdiction will be respected because immigration is a shared jurisdiction. So should the federal minister be able to reject hundreds of visa applicants who have been approved by Quebec? Yes or no?
Makes a strong case about protecting its jurisdictions under the Constitution. In fact, sometimes I believe British Columbia could learn a bit from Quebec and assert its provincial authority as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know it's a riding name that rolls off one's tongue. My question to my honourable colleague here, because I know he has, as most Conservatives, in fact, I'd say all Conservatives have, spent time.
I love Andrew Lawton. Like, it just seeing Andrew Lawton makes me happy. I don't get it. I don't understand why that is.
Engaging with police chiefs and police officers in his riding and across his province. Has any police chief said that the pressing crime issue they need to deal with is people using cash? Because this bill goes far beyond what the Liberal government says it will. This prohibits otherwise law-abiding citizens from buying a used vehicle in cash. Have any members of law enforcement said they want this right?
Honourable member for Mission Matsky Abbotsford.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I actually just recently met with the Chief of Police of Abbotsford, and he mentioned nothing about cash transactions. In fact, with my conversations with the police forces in the Fraser Valley and in the Greater Vancouver region, they were mostly concerned about bail. They want to see bail reform right now. That's what they want to see. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Secretary of State. Oh, yes. Yeah,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask the member whether he particularly asked that question, because I've spoken all summer to law enforcement, and they do like the provisions, in particular when it comes to using cash to buy luxury items, cars, luxury bags. It's money laundering. It's been a big problem in Canada. I know the Conservatives called on action for that. So why won't the member support it? And please let me know if you asked the police that question.
The honourable member for Mission Matsky Abbotsford for 20 seconds.
Well, Madam Speaker, as it relates to money laundering, I've been up in this House talking about the Peter German report and about the implications it's had on British Columbia, probably more than any other member. What I find so ironic today is that the Liberals, for the very first time in my 6 years in this chamber, are actually speaking about protecting Canadians for a change, because under their watch we have seen a rise in crime and violence against women and an
resuming debate. The Honourable.
All right, gang. We're going to check something else out. There wasn't a lot left in that one. They were going to be wrapping up. I do have a video here, though, that I do want to show. Stephanie Kusi, haven't seen much of her lately. She's one to watch. She's a firecracker. She's a star. And also in this, Ned Couric, who is new to the House. He's from Hamilton. But again, some of these names you'll get to know if you follow politics, like actually watch politics, not the news, but the stuff that happens in the House of Commons. These are names that you'll get to know. Gang, Aaron here, Canadian Looney. How y'all doing? So one of my favorite things that we'll be doing this fall is covering the committee investigations. We can't cover all of those live, but we try to show the highlights and the best clips from the other committee investigations. We try to watch them all, and the stuff that I see that is very interesting, I try to share if there's something to learn. I try to spread the knowledge. That's it. This one's got Stephanie Cousy. She's one of my favorites, firecrackers from the Conservative Party. We've got Ned Couric. He's new to the House of Commons after the last election. He's from Hamilton, but definitely worth a watch. John Williamson is the chair of this. This is a Public Accounts Committee, and he is a solid, very sharp chair of the committees. Anyway, let's get into this. Stephanie Cousy's always entertaining, and Ned Couric is definitely a guy that you'll get to know his name. Let's take a peek. Let's get into this.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
I'm really here to try to listen and try to kind of find out if there's a divide. I'm proposing we try to settle on a couple of reports or studies just to get us going, and then we reconsider when the auditor delivers her next batch of investigations, how we proceed for the remainder of the year and probably early into the new year. So what I'm going to do, and I don't have the speaking order. I'm going to begin with Ms. Cousy, and then I'll go to someone on the government bench. But I do want to hear from everyone, so everyone will get a turn. The first round will be for 6 minutes from all three parties, as it is in a regular round. Then I'll go as if we're in a second round, 5 minutes for the official opposition, 5 minutes for the government, 2 minutes 30 secondes pour le bloc. I am going to be generous with time here. If
2.5 minutes for the bloc.
To say, I'll come back to you around. But this is just meant to give everyone an opportunity to speak. Does that sound?
I thought we were just going to have a general discussion.
Well, we are, but I want to hear from every member. And to me, this is the kind of it's just going to go back and forth like a ping pong ball. So, so I'm open to alternatives. I just thought that was a way to make sure I hear from everyone and to wrap things up. And as I know, there are some members who have a couple things they want to say. Certainly from one side, I indicated that if someone feels they've not had an opportunity, I'd come back to them as well. So it's just a way for me to kind of regulate it and get things going. So without further ado, Ms. Cousy, you have the floor on your priorities for this session.
Thank you, Chair. And certainly we want to start this conciliatory. We want to move forward in a collaborative fashion, which I know this government has set out to do, as the Prime Minister has given you the mandate to do. Chair, I'm so sorry you couldn't be there to draw attention to your absence, but the conference in Regina was just absolutely outstanding in terms of the camaraderie and also the lessons, I think, that we learned in terms of best practices from across the country, something really outstanding. So we definitely, I think, as a committee, came out of the conference with a renewed sense of collaboration and wanting to do what is in the interest of the Canadian people. Now, obviously, given that we're all different political parties, all of us will approach this with a different lens in terms of our values, our principles, the positions that we come from, and what we think is most valuable for the average Canadian citizen, which, of course, we hope to serve through this committee. But you have asked for our preferences in terms of studies going forward. As the Auditor General has said herself, and even said last night at dinner, there is no shortage of topics to choose from. The reports run the gamut, and every single report, as we learned in Regina, is something of significant consideration to her and her team when she decides to do it and when she decides, her and her team decide to execute it. So both in the decision and in the completion of the report, these are not picked without due consideration. So with that, Mr. Chair, we are very interested in Report 3, which was just released in June, current and future use of office space, with a projected deficit of probably $84 billion, even though it currently sits at $61.9 billion. This government, this country needs revenue right now. And in the report, it was determined that there was going to be savings of $3.9 billion over 10 years, and that's really a drop in the bucket in terms of what we need. Some of the findings which stand out to me, or I should say one finding in particular, Mr. Chair, is that the revenues of sold assets aren't even currently documented, and to me that's astounding that we're not even keeping track of what we are disposing of from a balance book perspective. I think this pairs very nicely with the housing initiative of the government, and I think that there is a lot to learn, both in terms of cost savings, efficient use of assets, and also as I said, hand in hand with the housing strategy of the government. So this would be our first one. Our second one that we're interested in, Mr. Chair, is the 2024 report number 5 of McKinsey and the broader study, of course, of the professional services, specifically is what I'm pointing to, the study on professional services. Again, we have seen trouble with finding value for money time and time again. Both the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Auditor General, I should say not both, all three of them, and the Procurement Ombud has stated over and over again that there is a lack of oversight, there is a lack of following through in terms of the rules, the regulations, their application, and the value for money. Also a theme at the time when this report was undertaken, Mr. Chair, were frankly the actors involved. This, of course, was under the previous Trudeau administration, but there was concern about the implication of McKinsey, the key players, Dominic Barton, and their influence on the government all throughout all ministries, all departments. And I think given the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, and his past positions, in addition to the conflicts of interest which have been reported, we must always keep our guard up as to these things as well. So that would be the second one. And the third one, Mr. Chair, I'm sure will come as no surprise, but it is GC strategies. The AG report shows more of the same. The Liberal government still needs to tighten up in terms of their procurement, where we learned from the Auditor General that in her samples, 21% of the samples lacked security clearances. In 33% of contracts examined, federal organizations could not show the contract resources, had the experience, qualifications needed to complete the work. In 58% of the non-competitive contracts examined, federal organization failed to assess whether there would be benefits to calling for bids. Only 54% of contracts examined were situations where the federal departments could prove that their deliverables were even received, Mr. Chair. So we have a long way to go. And the final piece in regards to this report is, Mr. Chair, we never determined who chose GC strategies. We never got to the bottom of that, Mr. Chair. So with that, I'll lay out our choices again. Number 3, Report 3, current and future use of office space, professional services, highlighting McKinsey, and number 3, Report number 4 from just this June 2025, GC strategies. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oh, yeah. Mr. Kirk, we'd like to go for a couple minutes here as well, for 5 minutes.
Pleased to be on the. Is this live or? It's okay. Perfect. Sorry. Thank you. Glad to be here, and I am honored to represent the taxpayer at this committee. I'm going to go through some reports and touch on some things, and then talk about the two that I think we should focus on the most. So first and foremost, report number 3, current and future use of federal office space. I found some interesting quotes in there. First, the CMHC is reporting of the number of housing units built lack clarity. In addition, the initiative did not maximize access to affordable housing for those with the greatest need. The Auditor General confirmed what Canadians already know, that the government is failing on housing. Nearly half of the units promised through CMHC programs won't be ready on time. The so-called affordable housing doesn't even target the lowest income families who are struggling, and that is a big concern. So I would put forth that we look at report number 3 specifically. The second one I'd like to touch on, and I'll go through them. Report number 4, professional service contracts with GC Strategies. Specifically here, the value for money did not meet the Auditor General standards. Security requirements were not enforced. The study states that the federal organizations were not able to show that all contract resources had the appropriate security clearance prior to the contract being given. In 46% of these contracts examined, almost half, the study found that federal organizations had little to no evidence to support that deliverables were received. Despite this, the federal government officials consistently authorized payments. So we have to look at report number 4, and we have to tackle 3 things: value for dollar, security issue, payment without proof of work was completed. I would like to put forth that we take a closer look at report number 4. Those will be my 2 main suggestions. Some other interesting things I found in the other reports was a report on COVID-19 pandemic CEBA, Canadian Emergency Business Account. First, we have a $8.5 million in remaining loans to collect. And in this report, there is clearly no plan on how they are collecting on these defaulted loans. And collecting on loans could last till 2032. Over half of these ineligible loans have still not been paid off. And that's a very, very big concern to me, and I think the Canadian taxpayer. As a result, now we have $3.5 billion in COVID-19 business loans that were given to ineligible recipients. Very concerning. In this report, it's clear that the government likes to move fast with no control or no plan. On report number 7, combating cybercrime, I found in this report that the CRTC received about 75,000 reports of cybercrime-linked incidences and only investigated 6. This is extremely concerning because the government is failing to protect Canadians. And something that hits home to me is I have an 84-year-old father, and this is exactly what targets, these crimes target seniors. And they could be the most affected. So that I found very, very concerning. Next, report number 8, Zero Emissions Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Quote, in a 2024 report done by Dunsky Energy and Climate Advisors, identified the need for approximately 240,000 public charging ports by 2023. The current ZVIP target is to support 78,500 public and private chargers by 2029. That's only 33% of what we would need to support the government's EV mandate. Report 2, I'd like to touch on delivering Canada's future fighter jet capability study. This audit shows that we're more than 3 years behind on the infrastructure, and 6 years later, we still have a shortage of pilots. Simply put, at the end of the day, we will have planes with no pilots and no runways. Report number 11, programs to assist seniors. StatsCan says that the population of seniors could almost double over the next 2 decades. The audit found that the government programs were out of touch on the wants and needs of seniors. They also couldn't determine if the programs were effective, nor could they show how many seniors had benefited. So I will spend my time on this committee to, again, like I said in my opening statements, represent the taxpayer, and that's my job. And to reiterate, I'd like to focus on report number 3 and report number 4. And thank you for my time.
Oh, yeah. Are there any other comments anyone would like to make? I'm not, so I agree. I'm sensing some broad agreements. I'm not going to attempt to repeat it now in case I get it wrong, but there's a few of us up here who are taking notes. All right, we are suspended. We'll come back as quickly as possible as we can in camera. Thank you. This meeting is suspended.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
All of that is pretty tame right there, but these committee investigations, points of orders like personal conflicts, people that don't like each other sitting in the same room debating, arguing most of the time. It's a gong show too, but less of a pageant than the House of Commons question period is. Definitely worth checking out. If you enjoyed that video, it's only going to get better. Smash the subscribe, hit the like, share this with somebody. Come and learn about what is actually going on. The Conservatives are sharp, the Liberals are deceptive. There's a conspiracy going on in Canada, and the CBC is in on it. So it's tough to have a conspiracy that big without it being like showcased. And that's what we're trying to do here. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like I show, I don't tell. This is it. Check this out. We're making a point. Watch the whole thing.
Calgary, Mindamore.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister claims to be different. Instead, 6 months in, Canadians are now learning that this Prime Minister is no different than the last guy, as Liberals increase spending on their well-connected consulting friends by 37%. Everyday Canadians pay more and more for gas and for food. So here's a lesson for my Liberal friends. A deficit that doubles isn't different, is it?
I
have a lot of respect for my colleague. I would like to remind her that we already cut taxes on the middle class and on first-time home buyers.
That's true.
And as many Conservatives have asked us to do, we cut also the carbon tax. So all that to say, over the summer we also took a very strong action to bring down costs for broadband services and to increase competition in the telecom sector. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to be there for Canadians and to build Canada strong.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister told Canadians that he was the man with the plan, yet 6 months later, his budget is nowhere to be seen. And experts now project that his deficit will be double what Trudeau already created. This Prime Minister is proving one thing, that Liberals, no matter how they brand themselves, cannot be trusted to handle our finances. Canadians expect and deserve a government that will work for them on the issues that matter the most. Right. Yet 60% of Canadians say that cost of living keeps them up at night. So when will the Liberals start acting like it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did you get the point?
What?
So we're going to wrap up, guys. Thank you all for hanging out. Yeah, I wanted to watch some of that post-show after the question period anyhow. Aaron, Canadian Looney, to anybody new that just found the channel, we're here every day for the question periods. I make dozens of videos a week. Check them out. We're just trying to let the world know what a lot of the people here are informed. A lot of the videos I make are preaching to the choir. Share them with somebody. Like, for example, my mom has no idea. She gets everything from CBC, doesn't watch my stuff, won't. She thinks I'm going to get in trouble and end up going to jail, which is a possibility down the road. I mean, they put Bill C-63 through. Like, this is all going to be hate, which it's not. Like, I love Canadians, but they're duping the people I care about, and I'm not down with that. Like, I can't put my finger exactly on what's going on, but I know that we're in the middle of a big dupe, and it's not like the first day. This did not like start happening April 28th. This is years into it, maybe decades. And it's accelerating and real time. It's happening around the world. Check out France, check out UK, check out New Zealand, Australia, like the United States even. So something's happening here. Anyhow, try to keep it light most of the time. Lost Art, what's going on? Yeah, say hello to some people. Rory, what's up? My man, Kirk, always, you know. P, welcome. Kyle, welcome to the group. Nice to meet you, Jesse Rose. Ken Flanders, I see you there. What's going on? Charlene Hopper, what's that? You've been... I feel like I remember you for as long as I remember anyone. We saw our man Brent Parsons in here earlier. I never like to miss anybody, but it's also hard. I can't remember everyone. P, what's up? Colton, there's somebody new. What's going on, brother? Yeah. Anyhow, we're going to wrap up right there. We're back tomorrow, question period. Aaron, thanks again, Kirk. Thank you, Rory. Did we see Rhonda in here earlier? I'm not sure. I forget it. It all blends together. Till the next time, gang. This is an intro I made for question period, but that's what we're going to go out on. It shows my backyard. That's me playing with my drone.
Questions orales, oral questions.
Smash the like, subscribe, share with somebody.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
WTF. Here, here.
Hey, everyone, quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
The one we call Canadians.
But let me ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, will there always be a Canada?
There will always be a Canada.
All right, elbows up.
Elbows up.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney.
Hey Kyle, what's up, brother?
Issues in Canada, right?
Thank you for tuning in.
Completely head in the sand. Be aware of this.
Oh yeah.
And now, oral question.